great to see you all here, and I'm really looking forward tremendously to this Basis Wednesday webinar. Just to introduce myself, I'm Chris Whitaker. I'm the chair of Basis, and I'm going to help facilitate the panel. So no presentations or anything like that from me. So speaking of today's intro, I was spending a bit of time yesterday evening. It was rather gifted to me because there was a piece on the BBC News last night about, I think, probably reporting what we all instinctively know, is that 48% of people are saying they've put on weight during lockdown. It's actually like an average gain of 3 kilos. So it kind of brought it nicely as a thread for today, looking at recreational and non-professional sport and the fact that it's unlocking from this weekend. And this probably was a really opportune moment then to talk about it and to talk about how we come back, and certainly how we come back in a sustainable way. I know I'm preaching to the converted here when obviously drawing that link between sport and physical exercise and better health and mental wellness outcomes that stem from that. But we've got a good panel here which will address all those issues. And I'll come back to them in a while. So I'm kitted out in my local club shirt just to show solidarity with the reopening of sport. And I'm one of those tragics who doesn't know really when to stop playing. Our season started on Saturday, and that kind of then brings me to the next theme of today, which is obviously about climate change and sport. And I've played a long time, as probably some of you out there will know. And I, for one, certainly can't remember it being this cold or wet at the start of the season on a consistent basis. I'm talking about over a number of weeks. I know we've had snow in April and you know, strange weather patterns at the beginning of the season, but certainly in terms of the games that I've played, it's been bitterly cold and then of course wet and rained off on Saturday. So, you know, is that some harbinger of what's to come in terms of the changes of weather and the impact that climate change is going to have on sport, which is a nice then lead into, you know, what the BBC are doing. They launched their Sport 2050 program, well worth a look at, and that certainly imagines what the impact of climate might have on sport if we don't start putting in place, you know, the measures that we need to do so immediately. So we're going to talk about recreational sport and physical activity, and you know how that can be part of the change. So I see that there's a very knowledgeable crowd in today, and therefore I'm very fortunate to be joined by a stellar panel of interesting and informative people whom I want to thank for taking the time for being with us. So we're not going to do any presentations, and I know they'll all speak from the heart because they're all close to the community sport and delivery of physical activity, and also in grassroots development. So as we go around, I'll let them introduce themselves, but just to let you know, we've got representation from a number of sports and physical activity, from local authorities, community and grassroots sports personnel, a club chairperson, a league chairperson, and experts in technology solutions, plus an advocate for a program to help carbon emissions, to cut carbon emissions at grassroots clubs. So it'll be a discussion, and we'll look at a number of questions connected to all those topics, but certainly we welcome your input, and we really encourage you to get involved. If you want to unmute yourself and ask ask the questions directly, please do. And we'll take your questions over the chat as well and pose them as we go along. Okay, so I'm going to start with Adrian Ledbury, and I'll let him introduce himself and just pose the one question to him around the experiences and challenges, Adrian, that you face, but you think sport will face in the coming year and beyond?
Thanks, Chris, and good afternoon, everybody. So I'm Adrian Ledbury from the Active Partnerships national team. If you don't know about Active Partnerships, they're strategic organisations working across the whole of England, trying to get people more active, basically, and working for the small national team. We support that. We represent, support and lead those active partnerships. So we're very much at the start of our journey with regards to understanding climate change and sustainability. So I'm not on the panel at all as an expert, but certainly as an interested party. We've started to think about what it means, why we should do it, what we can do to support in this area. So I'm just as interested in your views and that of the panel. So, Chris, what was the question that you wanted me to look at?
Looking at the unlocking of sport and physical activity, obviously, as well. Just the impact that the lockdown has had on it, and obviously we touched on the kind of weight gain and the challenges to mental health. But in your view, the sort of long-term impact that might have, both now and perhaps in the future? Or do you think you've got some of the answers?
Yeah, I think clearly, in terms of on the negative side, deconditioning, as you've referred to, is a massive issue where people are struggling in terms of being able to be active, have the confidence to be active, have the access to facilities, which is obvious, as things are closing down. So especially those people who are maybe furthest away from activity in the first place are finding that they're even more deconditioned. We've talked about obesity before, and that's rising as well. So certainly we are storing up some issues there, which COVID has exacerbated, especially in terms of some of the health inequalities. But on the positive side, certainly, I'm sure we'll be talking about it today, but some of the innovation that's come out, some of the green innovation that people might be able to talk about has certainly been a positive. So one example is on-demand opportunities, being able to exercise at home and get access to some unbelievably great content has certainly been good. And just generally, I think the connectivity of organisations working across the sector, I think that's definitely improved. And hopefully that's something that we can build on relative to sustainability. And really mobilize the sector to see if we can do something really special. So yeah. I think that's something that has been a positive, across what's been a very challenging 18 months or so.
Great, thanks, Adrian. Richard Lindsay, sorry. Just from your perspective and the kind of insight work you do, I'd be interested to hear in football what's your kind of view on that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Chris. Hello, everyone. So Richard Lindsay from Birmingham County FA. So we sit as one of the regional offices for the FA that are predominantly working in grassroots sports, so grassroots football. And I guess for us, the next 12 months are critical with regards to how football grassroots recovers from COVID. Supporting and retaining numbers within the game, whether that's participants who are playing or those that actually volunteer and run clubs. It's around supporting so that the clubs that are maybe burdened by financial issues, additional resource constraints that the clubs might have as well. But what we are seeing is that there's a real appetite to get back into playing. Our affiliation, our window for opportunity is just opened, and we're seeing a huge influx of new clubs coming in and wanting to play. So we know that the appetite is there for those to play. We just need to be mindful of obviously making sure that we retain as many in the game for as long as possible. And I think, just following on from what Adrian's just mentioned there, I think there will be, over the short term, some sort of trade-off required around sustainability and the impact of health and well-being. So it's just finding that balance, I think, short term for the two, before we really press on and really look at how sport can make a difference in this space.
Thanks, Richard. Actually, so you've teed up a nice question there, which was going to be my next one. And this is aimed at Richard, Parker and Emma. So in terms of that coming back, and how do we kind of unlock, bearing in mind the impact it could have in terms of less sustainable kind of practices. And I'll give you a great example. So cricket, and Trevor will emphasize this, but talking about cricketees and saying that they have to be now brought by the individual to the games. Well, that has meant a huge upsurge in the amount of single-use plastics, for example, because people go to local supermarket and buy their sandwiches or whatever, whereas before they were prepared in a kitchen, put out on plates that were washed up and reused and all the rest of it. So that's just one very esoteric kind of example, but I'd be interested in the wider sort of impact. So Richard, do you want to start?
Well, I was going to hand over to Emma, actually. I'm sure she's...
Okay.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for that, Chris. So my name's Emma Burlow. I'm founder of Lighthouse Sustainability. I help businesses set and hopefully achieve their sustainability goals. I've got a lifelong interest in sport, and my husband works in sport. So hopefully, I can talk a little bit personally today, and also how we work across businesses to try and tackle the same challenges as everybody's tackling in any organisation. So back to sport. Yeah, so I'm going through this a lot myself with the sporty family. So I'm trying to get back to netball. I'm waiting passionately for parkrun to start again. One of the things I've noticed is, and I think it will continue, is things like car sharing, and not wanting to use minibuses, the waste issue that you mentioned, Chris. And I would say, I think I've seen this a lot in retail as well. There's a lot of confusion about the messages that you can and can't give, or should and shouldn't give. So there's a lot of hesitation around things like using your own cups, even refilling your bottles in the clubhouse, things like that. Even down to basic things. I think that's made everyone sort of pull back a bit, but I don't think it'll last that long. I'm working with a lot of companies on refill and cup reuse and that sort of thing, and they're all gearing up for autumn, really, for these systems to be back in place. So I think our role as ambassadors in this, in sport, is to give clubs the confidence to say, you're not breaking any rules. Maybe there could be some guidance on a website if you've got your national governing body could lead them to. But we definitely found that with independent coffee shops and restaurants, and that they all resorted back to disposables because they thought that's what they had to do. Legally, they didn't. Yeah. So, I would just say that that's something, there is a lack of guidance. We know that. And risk averse. So I think we've got a great opportunity actually to bring people back and say it's okay. We've looked at the guidance.
Thanks, Richard. What's
Chris? I can't add any more to that.
Okay. I'm interested, obviously, in your initiative in trying to get clubs to look at their carbon emissions, and do you think coming back from this is going to present you with a better opportunity or less of an opportunity?
Oh, that's a good question. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Richard Parker. I'm president of HS Green Cricket Club, which is, there you go, that's the background to it. There's a big, there's a big oak tree behind the club had to be cut down because the droughts in the summer gave us subsidence. You can see the ground at the foreground is very warm. That's because it gets too wet in the winter. So I think one of the later questions is, has the impacts of climate change affected cricket already? And yes, it certainly has. I'm speaking on behalf of HS Green Cricket Club, which is, to the best of our knowledge, the world's first carbon balanced cricket club. We achieved this in 2013, and Rhys Topley, bless him, he's come back in focus just in time, presented with us our certificate, and it's really, really easy. Okay, I'm a great believer in taking positive action. Okay, I don't really come on these things because I'd rather do stuff than talk about it. But for nearly a decade, we've measured our carbon emissions. We've reduced our carbon emissions, and crucially, we've offset our carbon emissions. And there's a lot of bad vibes around offsetting carbon certification, but we work with a fantastic organization called the World Land Trust, who nobody has ever heard of, but David Attenborough's favorite environmental charity. So all of our offsetting cost goes to protecting priceless eco-diverse rainforests around the world. And we've done that. And the big question I asked in 2013 and 2014, and we use interns to help with this, University of East Anglia are really good, was why do other people do this as well? And because that brings us back to your question, Chris, I could talk about this for a long time, but we did some research on the kind of drivers and barriers to this individual, community, organization, society level. We looked at finance, but we've done lots of ways to try to work out how to get this working. And I think the biggest difference is between nearly 10 years ago and now is people think there's a problem. Okay, I mean, we did this, we came about from a different action that helped to start this thing with HH Green. But at the time, nobody thought we had a problem. Okay, and I think finally, people realise there's an issue there they need to start addressing, and that's why I'm more optimistic that other clubs will do this. I mean, I would say I've said enough, but that's. I'll save it more.
Thanks, thanks, Richard. We will come back to that, I'm sure. So that's sort of then sashes quite nicely to the technology side of things, Matt, and looking at the Internet of Things that you and Tony obviously have worked on various projects, and about how you can use technology in order to improve people's. I'm trying to think of the right word, but they can use technology in order to improve sustainability, to put it kind of in a crude way. So I'd be interested in hearing the sorts of products that are out there at the moment that you can use for measuring.
How's everything else going?
Yeah, no problem. I mean, I come back to your comments about only putting on, and I think an average of 3 kilos during lockdown. I think I'd be quite glad if it was only 3 kilos. So lockdown's been obviously a very strange thing for every building, every site, every team, and we've learned some interesting stuff. So number one thing, even completely vacant buildings where we've had customers who are looking at buildings that have been basically unoccupied now for more than 12 months, the actual utility savings only runs about 15%, because to maintain the fabric of a building, you still have to keep it warm and lit and all those sorts of good things. Second thing we've learned is that in a compliance sense, so is that building safe and compliant, you can only get engineers on outside of normal lockdown. So a lot of compliance stuff has kind of gone out the window. And what this has meant is that there has been a big push now to look at replacing people on site with technology on site, whether it's flushing taps or checking fire systems. But the little spin-off from that is that, of course, all the very low cost, simple remote metering stuff gets added in as part of those processes. And if you're going to look at your sort of green environmental impact of a building, it doesn't really matter if you're a sports club or an office. Actually, your most sort of environmental impactfulness generally is actually your buildings. And if you can measure what the status quo is today, then you can actually understand when you make changes whether you've made a positive impact or not. And I think that's kind of the key lesson that we've picked up over this lockdown, is it doesn't matter what your site is. People have now recognized that we can put tech in rather than engineers. And if we're putting tech in, we can do real-time measurements of everything, fridge freezers and metering solutions, solar generation. And therefore, we can have a better understanding of how that whole little system works. And therefore, we can make some improvements, whether it's extra insulation or slightly different policies, or lights that just turn off automatically. And you can actually see that benefit straight away.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And Tony has actually applied some of those types of technologies in a club setting, which is obviously this particular audience of interest. So, Tony, could you just give us a quick idea of some of those?
Sure. So Tony Rossiter, so I'm the chairman of Sherwood Cricket Club down in Rochester, Kent. We've been working on with the local council and different groups around sustainability for the club, and trying different technology and different ways of, improving our carbon footprint and, just generally doing the right thing. So simple things like separation of waste, into different bins is a simple one. We installed a large number of solar panels on the roof of the cricket club. We are just about to install some of Matt's technology to help us with a big challenge I see in coming back is the potential threat of Legionella. So Matt's company has a Legionella system that can automatically flush the taps and record temperatures and give you the information you need for your Legionella compliance. We're also installing some wireless temperature sensors within the fridges and the freezers, and again, monitoring that because we have broadband at the club. Other things we're looking at is GPS tracking high value assets using the same technology. So things like the mower, the roller, for instance, because what we're seeing is more and more theft now as clubs are being left empty for longer. Some other technology we've got access to, which is an eco-friendly beer line cleaning product that allows us to clean the beer lines once a month rather than once a week. And it's completely eco-friendly. So we're not pouring chemicals down the drains. And other things that we are recently looking at is around misters within the clubhouse. So we can actually remotely control them through a Wi-Fi and through Matt's technology, and use an ionized, positive ionized HOCl, whatever that means, water that allows you to kill viruses, including COVID, in the environment. So it's not harmful to humans. The body produces this chemical naturally, but what it does is it kills off COVID and viruses. So we can run that system remotely overnight, so we know that the next day that the clubhouse is clean. And it's really focused on trying to get back to a normal environment as quickly as possible. I think that's the key. Yeah.
Thanks. And that obviously is important. So I just want to talk to Laddie about that, because so in terms of participation, obviously there has been an effect on it. So from your perspective, and you can introduce what you do and in the two roles in your life, how you see that coming back and how we can do it in using the right sorts of measures and things to keep people active.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of new solutions out there at the moment that have come because of COVID. And personally, I don't think things are going to change that much over the next few years. I think we're still going to have it, this in the background. It's still going to be a challenge. And it's the way that we handle it as a community cricket club. I mean, if I look at our revenues have gone off the cliff because the bar is what really sustains the cricket club. Yeah, the membership fees, the match fees are non-existent now. Membership fees have been dropped for the past year, so income has plummeted. And the only way that we really see getting back to any kind of normality is to have the bar open and the functions at the club as best we can within the rules that we have. And just trying to maintain that safe environment is really, really important. I don't think it's taking the same approach as if you were going to a hotel. Yeah, if you know that hotel has been cleaned properly, you will be more likely to go there than somewhere else, to stay or for your sport. Yeah, and that's the way I look at it. Yeah.
No, thanks, Tony. Thanks. Laddie, I wanted to, from a community sport aspect, again, around participation and how you guys have been working to bring people back to your venues and obviously back to your parks and things like that.
Yeah, I'm Laddie Ajayi. I am the Leisure and Physical Activity Development Manager for the London Borough of Hackney, amongst other things, but let's just keep it to that today. Yeah, bringing back people and trying to maintain or increase people's participation with inside some form of sport or physical activity after COVID is extremely challenging. I work with inside and in the city, so there isn't many or private clubs. The club structures within inside our area are significantly less than what you would have in outer London boroughs. There is low take up of volunteering, believe it or not, with inside the sports sector, with inside inner London. However, we do still have the local authority that supports a number of different facilities across the borough, of which clubs will utilise to engage in terms of activity. We also have a number of schools within inside the borough that have, significantly good indoor facilities of which people would take part in or will use. But coming from COVID and from no activities and trying to re-engage people with different sets of rules, with trying to get up and running council leisure facilities that have been mothballed effectively over a year's period has been challenging. So it's very interesting to hear what Matt was saying about automatic miss and Tony, automatic miss systems, flushing of taps for Legionellas and things like that. These things have not necessarily been done with inside local authorities from what I'm aware of, or certainly not with inside in Hackney. And we have a brand new leisure centre that we'll open this summer, Britannia Leisure Centre in the south of the borough, brand spanking new. And I'm not even sure if that type of technology has been considered with inside there. So it's something to be said that, obviously there's a cost attached to it. And if it isn't built in the planning stages of building the building, then to retrofit might be slightly difficult. But, getting people into spaces which they've been excluded to for over a year is difficult, extremely difficult. Now, not only have you got the physical aspects of trying to open a building, you've also got the running aspects and the management of bringing people back from furlough to get into the spaces, to open them up, to allow people from within inside the community to utilize them. You've also got this dichotomy of where schools where we were able to use and clubs were able to use, are saying, no, we can't have you inside here because you're not COVID safe and we don't want to take the responsibility and everything else like that. So every sport that has been reliant upon schools in the indoor period, people who use nets during the winter, everything else like that, it's like, well, they can't get into them no more. And so we're having a battle with those schools to say, well, actually, it's not as bad as what you think. There are measures that we can put in place, but a lot of these places are risk averse. They don't want to be the first one to say there's an outbreak that's happened from this particular school. So we have this issue. From an environmental aspect, us as a borough, we have a manifesto commitment from our mayor, and it's one of the key performance indicators to reduce, be more environmentally friendly and reduce our carbon footprint as best as possible. And as a local authority, I think we've done quite well in addressing that in a whole range of things that we do. For grounds maintenance, it's a complete turnaround of the fleet of equipment that we're using, to electric equipment, even down to electric gardening equipment, so blowers, leaf blowers, trimmers, everything is now being moved towards that electric. So no longer petrol driven stuff. A complete reduction in the use of glyphosates for weed control and suppressing weeds within inside our borough. We are looking at heat sinks for the buildings within inside our parks and open spaces. So using those heat sinks to, energize CAFs buildings, all of those things. So we are actively trying to do that. But your original question, Chris, in terms of, you know, getting people back participating and engaging in sport and physical activity, it's challenging, and the numbers are actually saying so. If we look at the active people or active live survey, we know that there's been a drop in people participating with inside sport and physical activity. That 3 kilogram average, you know, weight gain, more like 5 with me, but you know, is very apparent. However, what we are trying to do is we are trying to get a lot more people engaging in the green spaces that we have. You know, even though in the city, we have lots of green spaces. So walking programs, utilizing outdoor gyms, getting people to socialize in those outdoor spaces, outdoor group exercise classes. We're going along that route, and it is difficult because of our weather, but that's where we're at.
Yeah, thanks. That was a fantastic overview, and tied up a whole number of discussion points that we've been covering in the last with the last few speakers. Joa, so from a council perspective, in terms of delivery, you probably see a lot of the obviously of the impacts of people coming back to various sites and things, and also from your community work that you do in Seven Kings. How do you kind of manage all that?
Hi everyone, my name is Jawar Ali. I'm the Recreational Leisure Service Manager for Thurrock Council, and my other hat, I run a not-for-profit organisation called Grassroots Trust, and we manage the cricket facilities at Seven Kings Park. So obviously, I'm quite lucky and fortunate I get to see both sides of the coin in terms of community groups wanting facilities, and then on the other side, as a local authority trying to manage people's return to the sites and facilities. I think after the initial lockdown, when there was an opening period last summer, actually we had very good take up of people wanting to return to the gyms. A lot of people did miss that, you know, routine of going to the gym and having the daily workout and exercise. So that was quite positive to see initially. Obviously, then in December, there was another lockdown, and that really was long lasting. And we're just kind of evaluating how that pans out in the next 2 or 3 weeks as we return to play and people are allowed back in the gyms. But I think one of the things that's been consistent is the use of our country parks and open spaces, people going on walks and visiting parks and open spaces. We've had record numbers of people visiting Langdon Hills Country Park. We normally have August Bank Holiday weekend, what we say is our busiest period. We've had a continuous August Bank Holiday weekend for most of last year. And so it's immense pressure on the staff, on the facilities. The facilities weren't designed to cope with the number of visitors. And a lot of these areas have special protections, SSSI, SPAs. And so it's difficult managing and educating people about what's the purpose of an open space and what's the purpose of, say, an outdoor gym or an outdoor exercise and sports and leisure area, because there are different purposes for different spaces. I think at the club at Seven Kings Park, we've been lucky because we've got the outdoor space, and we've just seen record numbers of people just coming to the park. When there was lockdown, people doing education from home, working from home, the number of people, sheer volume has been immense. So I think there's opportunities to try and work together. We've been fortunate, Redbridge Council and Vision Redbridge have been very supportive in trying to help us get the facilities ready, enable us to run activities. And I think as a local authority at Thurrock, we've tried to help the clubs as much as we can in getting people active and engaged, offering discounts. We understand clubs, especially community grassroots clubs, you know, if they can't play a full season and halfway through the season gets called off, you know, it's hard to raise the money. So we've actually given discounts to clubs in terms of fees and charges. But I think that there needs to be a hand in glove approach. You have to work with the local authorities. Otherwise, for clubs, it's really hard to operate and survive. Most clubs that we work with in inner London, in the Essex Essex metropolitan belt, use council grounds. Most clubs don't have the facilities.
That's interesting. So you raise a good point there about the kind of financial sustainability for clubs and how the pandemic has really kind of highlighted that. That, you know, most community clubs operate on a very thin, you know, financial kind of either fail or succeed kind of timeline. So, and the pandemic has really brought this very much to the fore. You know, clubs don't have those kinds of reserves to be able to last and come back from hits like those. So I'm going to pose this question to all of you, but Trevor, to start with, about, do you think we can use technology, for example, in the way that we manage our fixture lists? And I say that because, and probably football has a bigger problem, so it'd be interesting to hear Richard's question with that. So there are a number of kind of considerations in any league that you organize, because you have to look at the competitive side of it, and then, you know, you want to look at also how do you keep it as close to your community as possible, so that the fixtures are either community or regionally based or whatever. So do you think there's a way that technology could help with that, and that we could be smarter in the way we organise fixtures?
Hi, I'm Trevor Wright. I'm chairman of the Kent County Village League. It's a cricket league in the West Kent area. It's difficult. It is a really difficult. We're always juggling with when you get to the bottom of the tree with grassroots cricket. You have abilities right from the bottom, whereas people just want to socially play, up to the top of a division where you've got people that want to be competitive. And so basically what we've ended up doing is that, yeah, through our, fortunately with the governing bodies Play Cricket, they've got bits and pieces in there that we can sort our fixtures out with. As our clubs are quite very similar in thinking, we can and there's quite a lot of understanding. We don't have a great deal of issues with fixtures, but what we do is in the bottom divisions, so that you know, you've got the older generation and you've got the youngsters coming up. We haven't turned any clubs away, and we've adapted our league fixture so people feel comfortable to come into that level of cricket and are able to progress. Coming up.
And interestingly, sorry, Trevor, I gathered last season in terms of organising yourself for the pandemic, so you went very regional. And
yes, we did. We decided to tear up, well, keep the league structure to an extent, but we merged divisions, and then what we did, we pulled it into regions. So you had, I suppose there was one or two that had to travel a little bit, but we did that for the start of the season, which started in July. So everyone played locally for the first 5 weeks, and then we ended up going into a playoffs where you played against another group when it was towards the end of the summer, when the COVID restrictions weren't as strict, and that seemed to work really well. But the interesting thing is that when we went out to consultation this winter, that our clubs were happier to not regionalise so much and to keep it as it was. Which was quite, you know, when you consult with your members and everything you do is softly, because change doesn't happen overnight. You plant the seed, and then it happens in maybe not be 1 year, 2 years, but maybe 3 years. But all of a sudden people start coming round to it. That's what I found in over the last 7 years doing this job.
Yeah, okay, interesting. So Richard Parker, there might be something for you there. I'm mute.
Apologies, I muted myself. Yeah, I see technology as a barrier to action. You just have to motivate people to do it. I mean, you could, for example, very easily ask the leagues to automatically calculate the distances travelled between fixtures as part of the measuring, which we're trying to do, the league software that do that. But that's part of it. Because I'm kind of surprised at the some tactical focus of this discussion, because I think, you know, if we don't get the carbon element of sustainability sorted out very, very quickly, it really won't matter about beer lines and things in 2050 because we won't be playing cricket anyway. There won't be much left. I won't be around in 2050, probably. So we've cut ours down to 2030. That's our target. And we do that not only 2030 as a decade, but 2030 as a time, i.e. 8:30, because one of the barriers we find is that people are looking at sustainability and carbon reduction issues is the workload. Our carbon champions, who are young and female, because women need to get more involved in sport, do our carbon balancing in 2 hours. So you can be finished in time for Strictly. That's our mantra. The money is irrelevant, utterly irrelevant. I'd ask if anybody would guess what it would cost to carbon offset a small, and we do it with cricket, but we're looking to do it in rugby and any other community sport. Transport's 80%. We look at transport, energy and food. Food is an interesting one. Anyone want to guess? It's £150, including VAT, to offset the carbon emissions of a medium-sized cricket club. Utterly irrelevant. For the ECB people listening, with 700 recreational cricket clubs, you could become the world's first carbon balanced community for about £100,000. Okay, and if you don't want to find that money and do it, I'm going to do it because we need to get on with this. Okay, so that's my pitch. Guys, we keep talking about it. We need to start doing things.
Yeah, no,
we don't do it. There's nothing stopping them, Chris.
No, totally, and that's why I'm trying to get these sorts of discussions going, and then people adding to them. So, Richard Lindsay, you, as an insights person, someone who works with insights, do you think technology has a bigger role to play? I took fixture lists as one particular idea.
Yeah, I think so. So within football, not all football leagues, but quite a lot of football leagues operate boundaries anyway from where teams can travel in from. Which is advantageous in that respect. But I think there needs to be more sort of joined up thinking with the leagues, the clubs, the facility operators, because don't forget within football, there's only a small percentage that actually own their own facility. Yeah. A lot of them use the council and the third party venues. So there needs to be some joined up thinking there, again, with transport providers as well, to make sure there's a provision for people to not necessarily drive long distances to play. But just touching on your original point, again, around the leagues, there's other determining factors around competition, level of competitiveness, the structure of the competitions, the quality of the game that people are actually going to play by playing more locally. Some people prefer to travel a bit further because of maybe localized discipline and behavior issues, which we see in football. And again, I guess those leagues that are admin low, within volunteers, so the workload is low, they would probably get a bigger draw of the teams that wanted to play. So again, it's how can we use technology to, and this is something that the FA are looking at, to engage volunteers to spend less time. So smart technology, but I think there's definitely a role it can play in certainly in grassroots sport.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay, I see there was a question to address to all the panelists. If you want to have a quick read of that, and whichever one of you would like to answer it live, that would be this was from John Kemp. You might know it. He said a big thank you, so to get himself off on the right foot. So, but if one of you would like to answer that question, do. In the meantime, just carrying on the kind of discussion around using technology. Emma, do you see ways? And I know obviously you're involved in rugby, albeit via third party, but they do use quite a bit of technology as part of their
grassroots level.
Yeah.
I mean, we do. I would say, I know this is true of sustainability generally. You know, technology is great, but let's not distract from the mind shift change that we need. And I think a lot of people and a lot of the general public are kind of hoping that this will be solved by technology. It won't, it can't be.
Yeah.
So I think, yes, it's a vehicle, and yes, it's an absolutely essential tool. I love some of the ideas that were given about facilities management with technology. Absolutely, take the human error out of that. Totally, everyone's safer. But when it comes to a mindset change, you know, we're all humans on the same planet, whether we go to work for the ECB or the RFU or, you know, Smiths or wherever. We're all the same people. So I think the mindset change has to come from much more social and human comms than just tech. So I would say, you know, let's get the mindset really, really solid. Richard's right. We haven't got time. You know, it was 10 years ago, we should have been doing it. So we're actually borrowed time. Because if we wait for tech, we're waiting too long.
Yeah.
So for me, it'd be putting in steps now. And that's really just about, this is our charter as a club. This is our policy. We no longer do this. You know, I completely agree with Trevor. You have to do it incrementally and maybe slowly. But these kids, you know, that are coming to these clubs, they are way ahead of all of us oldies. You know, they don't want to use polystyrene cups. You know, on my boys rugby club, they still give you a cup of tea in a polystyrene cup. I'm like, it's like going back to the 80s. So, you know, they're way ahead of us. So we have to start acting more like them. Sorry, I know it's a technology question, but I'm not, you know, I'm just trying to say let's cart before the horse, really.
Sure. I think that's Richard's point. That, you know, it's complementary, but it's not the solution.
It is, but if you give people an excuse, they'll wait for it. That's the risk.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that, as Richard Parker was saying, is not the way we're going to solve this. It's more by
it's a useful tool, but it needs to. I certainly think with things like car sharing, and we use Hedger,
yeah.
For you know, that could easily be a car sharing tool as well. So you know, it frustrates me that we're all driving separately and stuff. So a lot of people use WhatsApp.
Unfortunately, COVID has
exactly.
You know, so but hopefully we'll be able to move away from that.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Okay.
Can I just add something to what Hannah has said? I think, as Emma has said, very quickly, I'm not sure we could wait for certainly national bodies to get this moving. I don't think we can wait for organisations to get this moving, because committees are typically functioned by older people and they've got all sorts of other issues to worry about, like getting players and plates, all that kind of stuff. Getting individual young people to get this moving is critical. We call them positive deviants, carbon champions, call them what you like, but giving them the tools to make their clubs more sustainable and carbon balanced is what we're looking at, because we just can't wait for bodies and organisations and check. You know, the number of people I speak to would like to do something, Richard. I've emailed the chairman. I spoke to Colchester Rugby Club. They're not interested. Can't wait for committees of old people to get this moving. We just can't do it.
Yeah, as an old person, I'm going to chuck in my thing to say that I would say that's patchy, because there are certainly people on committees who are taken seriously. But you're right, it does need to be driven from the bottom up, as it were. So we are trying different aspects of that. Okay, so that question that was posed, would anyone like to answer it?
Oh.
You see, it was all right. I can read it out if you like. He said, "Wonderful webinar, providing a real breadth of insight into the multitude of factors affecting sustainable sport as a result of lockdown. At Geo Foundation, we work with golf clubs to review and track their sustainability metrics across carbon, nature, and resources community, and has provided some fascinating insights into how the sport has adapted. What do some of the panel feel is their main measurement of sustainability for the next year?" Who'd like to start with that?
It's very simple. It's three. There's energy, transport, and food. That's what we use for cricket, and I guess would work for most other sporting organisations.
Okay. Any offers on that one?
I think from a league perspective, the sustainability is trying to keep clubs surviving and everything else like that. And for us, it's to stop conceded games, keep people active, move players around a little bit. We've got a player borrowing thing as well, so that if clubs are short, then and someone wants a game of cricket, they can go and play a game of cricket.
Yeah.
And so these are all the things that we've brought in. So from a league perspective, about keeping the sport going and keeping village clubs going, surviving, that's what I'd be measuring it against, is that we play as many games of cricket as we can.
Okay, yeah, and that's interesting, because that brings along with it some of the challenges we've been talking about with transport,
And one quick point, Chris. I mean, I'm sorry, Trevor. I mean, one of the things that having a sustainable or carbon balanced club of any sort is a very good marketing tool for you, because we all just heard from Emma that a lot of clubs think children are thinking, why are they doing this? The forward-looking organisation that's going to be attractive to both particularly youngsters and their parents to go and play it. Okay, and it's we bang on about our carbon.
Okay.
I just come in there, Chris. I'm certainly not an expert on this, and certainly not a grassroots level, but I think it'd be useful if there was something that was quite simple. Taking Richard's point about, there's a lot of volunteers and committees out there, something that people were able to use quite simply. And if there was something that enabled a bit of benchmarking as well, so that within those 3 areas, which seem really sensible, how we measure up to other clubs in our sport or other clubs in other sports. So something around keeping it simple and some basic benchmarking might help as well.
Fantastic. Okay, so I want to ask a tactical question. I'll come to you last on this one, Richard. So how do we make a match day, regardless of whatever sport it is, more sustainable event? Okay, so just a quick whip around. So we'll start with you, Joa. How would you see us being able to make a match day more sustainable? And we're talking obviously community events, grassroots, or physical activity.
I think as we come out of the lockdown and restrictions are eased, I think the issue of car sharing, that's very important, because too often we get so many people just rocking up on their own where they can actually share. Also, potentially, we talked about teas. We've seen it as well. People going for the meal deals and coming with lots of packaging, and then who picks up the litter? It's the committee members, and I suppose that's where there's a lot of frustration. I think one of the other things, a lot of us have old buildings with old boilers and old systems, and I think there's a lot of energy lost there. So potentially investing a bit of money. We've been fortunate in getting a grant, and we're going to be upgrading our lighting to LED lighting from the old lighting systems and replacing the boiler, so to try something a bit more energy efficient, because those are the things and areas that are used all the time. So if we can get the high usage things changed, then that could help. So those are some things we've started on.
Sounds like you should talk to Matt. So Laddie, from your perspective, in terms of so rather than ideas, what solutions do you think you as a council could provide, for example? So car sharing would be one.
I mean, there's several things that we do at Hackney Council. I mean, Hackney Council is hell bent about reducing the levels of traffic that go through and is present inside the borough. So there is actively moving towards active travel. So that's better use of public transport, walking, cycling, reduction of car parking spaces in and around our leisure facilities. It's a mixed bag there, because my personal opinion is if we're being moved towards hybrid cars and electric cars and that, you're still going to get cars. A load of things. So you create different problems in that way. But certainly within Hackney, we have a real big drive on reducing plastic use, single plastic uses inside our parks and leisure centres. We are putting water fountains in, which is quite unique and novice. So we're encouraging people to use reusable type like things. Going back to the technology inside for sport, we have a central venue football league. That's because we have the facility that's able to accommodate. Hackney Marsh is the home of grassroots football. Stay that way, but our leagues, everybody comes to one place, so there isn't the home and away matches or anything else like that, and that in itself reduces some of those travel complications, but it also brings people together, and there is economy in scales in certain things. So those are the things that are happening there as well.
And that's actually, it's an interesting point there, because you know, of course, a lot of sports facilities are now set outside the major conurbations, and you know, therefore involve a lot more travel and all the rest of it. I mean, that's a much bigger discussion. But
yeah, I think where there is going to be challenges though is those single entity clubs that using council or schools facilities around the place.
Yeah.
How do they contribute towards you know, being carbon neutral? You know, because they aren't in control of that building. It's the school or the leisure or the leisure management. You know, I think there's lots of things to be talking about where you buy your kit from, you know.
Well, that's another thing.
Sustainable ways of buying kit and things like that, possibly.
I'm going to ask Emma about that,
But yeah, I think as a local authority though, yes, you know, Hackney has declared a climate emergency, and as such, their policies and their strategies is to combat that climate emergency and contribute towards carbon neutrality wherever they can. So they've already got their own energy company that they're doing by putting solar panels on public buildings and housing buildings and things like that. You know, as I said before,
I mean, that's interesting. So that's both tactical and obviously bigger picture, which is
yeah, but definitely, I mean, where the local authority in Hackney can do that, then that's where they're going. But that isn't the same for all 33 boroughs within sight.
No, of course, yeah, but it sets it does set the kind of benchmark and place to start from. So Emma, in terms of making a match day more sustainable, quick answer.
Where did you start? Well, I'm going to combine it with the last question as well in terms of metrics. If we, you know, Richard's right, and I think it's nice to focus on some areas. If we, you know, carbon's going to be a currency soon, and we need to get more literate about that. And we do need our committees to be more literate. So there is a program called the Carbon Literacy Program. So that's a training course that people can go on to just understand. And I think carbon is if you measure carbon, if you understand, it's more important than measuring it, then everything else falls under that. Saving water falls under that, even biodiversity, plastics, they all fall under that. Okay, there are other benefits, obviously, air pollution, landfill and all the rest of it. But I think if we can get that into everyone's heads, that also means that we can safeguard those cricket pitches for Trevor and his clubs to play on in 10 or 20 years. It's a really hard thing to get people's head around. So I would say at match day, we need to start right from the top, the messaging, the sponsorship. This is something that people are starting to tackle, you know, not taking sponsorship money from high carbon industries. Controversial, but we've done it for alcohol and other betting and other things. So start the investments, the sponsorship, declaring a climate emergency, and it all starts to fall under. And then every decision you make, just as we have to think about health and safety, we have to think about carbon. And it starts to filter through.
Thank you. Thanks. Matt, just a quick run from you about and obviously match day and keeping it sustainable. And
I mean, obviously, the three kind of key issues, you know, food, transport, and energy. Part of all that is just measuring how much you do, and at least if you know what you're doing, you can change a policy and see what the improvement is. But you know, better measurement basically leads to better management, because you're all kind of playing chess with your eyes closed otherwise. And until you actually know what the real picture is and what actually happens, it's very hard to work out how policy changes actually positively benefit. Because with all modeling scenarios, it's about where you draw the box. So I remember quite a few years back now, I was at Imperial when they brought out the you know, the drive to get people into diesel cars. But I think if we were looking at that question again now, it'd be absolutely the reverse. You want everybody driving a clean petrol car. And we have to be a bit careful that issues can become driven because that's what we think we should do. But the truth is, it comes back to, if you measure it, then you really know. And if you get your borderline measurements or your baseline measurements done correctly, then you can actually measure the impacts, and you can find that maybe changing things or how you do things actually does have a positive impact, and sometimes has an impact you didn't even expect. But unless you've got that baseline, you haven't got a place to work from, really.
And that actually then sort of brings it to the people who need to do the measuring and coming up with the policies are the governing bodies. And one of the questions I did pose, but unfortunately we ran out of time, was around governing bodies and kind of, do they have a bigger role to play in changing the behaviours within sport? Richard's probably sitting at one of the biggest ones, and I know they've done a lot of work, but it's going to require a lot more of actually talking down at grassroots. I don't mean talking down, but talking at grassroots and trying to get them involved in making those changes along with everybody else. So, okay, we have hit the 3 o'clock mark, and we're always very religious about making these last an hour. And I'm always notorious for overrunning. and I know my boss is sitting in the crowd, so he'll slap my wrist. So I just want to say thank you all very much for participating in the panel. And honestly, I thought that one comment about the insights that you all gave and the kind of getting the discussion going and also representing, as I said, the area of sport I think is not properly looked at in terms of what it can do around helping with the impact of it on the climate. And sport has a big role to play and can play a big role. And certainly down at grassroots level we can. So I'm going to suggest to the audience, if they do want to ask more questions, please send them in to us and we will send them on to you at the panel if you're happy to answer them, just to keep the conversation going. And hopefully we'll be able to follow this up again in either a month or so's time with maybe a smaller webinar where we address particular issues. So thank you all very much, both the crowd attending and for the panel, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Thank you.